I'll never forget, we pulled up and there was a sign, Victoria Park, and I couldn't believe that this football club was so big it had its own train station. And we got out, we walked over the footbridge, and being a little fella, as we went over the hump of the footbridge, suddenly I could see the black and white stands, and to this day I still get the shivers from it.
Really, the ideas for the books come from discussions that I'd had with leaders of our Indigenous communities, and they talked to me about how important it was to take the history and the stories and the learnings from hundreds of years, sometimes thousands of years, and pass that through the generations, through the stories that they told, and how it was a responsibility of the leaders to actually pass those stories on so that the kids coming through could learn it, they could understand it, appreciate it, and then they had the responsibility to pass it on again. And it occurred to me, as the Collingwood Football Club has this long history, and it's not thousands of years, but 118 years of history, and so much of that can be lost if we don't pass those stories on as well.
In my research, I found wonderful stories about players, courageous and brave stories, funny stories and sad stories, and I felt that these stories needed to be written down. They deserved to be preserved. I wanted my children to know these stories, and I felt that other Collingwood supporters would too.
When we put it into book form, once they learn about it, they can pass it on again and again, and it becomes basically a collectible for all Collingwood people.
Every Monday morning I spent at Collingwood Football Club archives with a gentleman by the name of Tom Wanless, and Tom has seen many a footy season. He's a 70 plus member.
Well, I personally have seen 21 grand finals, 21 Collingwood, I've seen 67 altogether, 21 Collingwood grand finals. We've won 4, lost 16 and drawn 1.
And Tom's recollection of stories and folklore stories was really wonderful and inspiring.
Albert Collingwood was arguably the best player Collingwood's ever had. I mean, I think these days they talk about Nathan Buckley's the best I've seen. Bobby Rose is probably the second.
You think back to those moments and the connection with the fans, the connection with the team, and I think that does really bond you into the history as well, when you know that you are achieving something that is going to be remembered.
In the Great Depression, players hid their injuries so that they could still earn their £3 a week to put food on the tables for their families. Victoria Park used to have a white picket fence around it, and pickets used to go missing all the time because people would take them home as firewood.
We were the club that let the sustenance workers in for free during the Great Depression. We built our stands at Victoria Park with unemployed workers in the area. We gave out soup kitchens at the football. We gave people a reason for being, and during the worst economic time in our history of our country and the history of the world, the Great Depression, we won 4 premierships in a row.
Whilst you're there, you're obviously adding to the tradition, adding to the history of the club, and over time you actually start understanding where you fit, and the fact that you're part of something so much bigger than yourself.
And that's our motto now at Collingwood. If you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing. And what it stood for was anybody could be part of the biggest thing in town as long as they wore a black and white scarf and said, "Go Pies."
Going to the footy is like breathing.
And we are a pretty fanatical lot. A bit too fanatical at times.
Well, I don't think there's any supporters like the Pies supporters. They go through a fair bit more than your average run-of-the-mill AFL supporter. I think you need to be more invested if you're a Collingwood fan.
It's amazing to see how important, and in many cases they use the words, the most important thing in their life, which is quite an amazing energy that comes from that passion. So to be part of that huge community, and we think it's around about 1.5 million people around the world, and it gives you a connection in every office that you work in every school that you go to. There isn't a place in Australia, and in many cases around the world, that you can't find another Collingwood supporter to share that experience with.
Players try to make them aware of how lucky they are to be a part of a club with such tradition.
You either love them or hate them, because that annoys me. I say to people, "Why do you hate Collingwood?" Oh, I don't know. They're just told to hate them.
We're the only club that says in its theme song it recognises its supporters. See the barrackers are shouting. Side by side we stick together to uphold the Magpies' name. It actually means something at our club. They're not just weasel words. These were written by the players back in the 1910s, 1915s, and it has resonated right through the football club since 1892, when it actually was the drawing point of all these people to come together. That's what Collingwood's about. That's what it's like in 2010, and I hope that's what it's going to be like in 2090.
Writing this story has changed me as a Collingwood supporter. I now have so much more respect for the history of the club. It has made me reconsider my feelings for Collingwood, feelings that you get at a packed MCG, that sense of belonging to something that's bigger than yourself, bigger than your family or your workplace or the town that you're from, and it's wonderful.
Good old Collingwood forever, they know how to play the game. Side by side they stick together to uphold the Magpies' name. See the barrackers are shouting as all barrackers shout.